We're in the northeastern Yorkshire Dales National Park. It's a beautiful and sparse area, so there's not many people who live kind of per mile here. But I think it is somewhere that's often kind of seen as idyllic and like a picturesque location, but not often thought of as a working landscape or the complex histories of the land or the people who have worked the land. And I think I'm always really interested in that kind of like hidden history of where I live and where I'm around. That's where a lot of my work kind of sparks from, is that interest in what's kind of beyond that beautiful picturesque place, and the stereotype of that rural idyll. This is an area where we are kind of seeing climate loss really quickly, and for this project especially I was kind of thinking about what kind of people are going to get to live in this area and who's not going to get to live here, and what does that mean for the area and how it works. And I think that space where I'm in now, which is kind of like someone who's left and come back, is a space that I can think about the place with like nuance and kind of consider these issues differently than I would have been able to if I hadn't left. I'd kind of hidden my like farm labourer practice because I was like embarrassed about sharing that, or felt like I wouldn't be seen as a real artist because of that. And I think a lot of people do have to do other things with their practice, and especially working class artists need to have something where they have a rent every single month and it's supported. And for me, farm work fits that. So with Daughters of the Soil, it was the first time where I could openly say I am a farm labourer, and actually that might help my practice because I'll be able to kind of connect with these people and I'll know a little bit about what they're doing. And it just became like really natural the way those relationships worked, but also the way that the women introduced you to other women. It's this kind of like network, and it kind of naturally progressed to the lie of the land, which was more about class and gender in the countryside. And I think for me, I felt like I had to make that work because I never saw class in the countryside. I kind of see these stereotypes of this is a pastoral middle class place, and I often think like, where did that come into play? Because for so many years the countryside is like entangled with class and the history of it, and I'd kind of researched it and not seen that spoken about a lot, and not seen it spoken about but visualised. And there was also kind of like a really big jolt in me because like, as someone who is working class in the countryside, I'm the subject, I'm not the artist. And I think that there is a kind of like, a quiet rage about that, because why can working class people not depict their own lives? And I don't think it should just be one kind of vision of what this is. And for me, the more kind of people telling these stories, it makes them more powerful and more important. And it gives you like a multi-layered approach to storytelling that I think only we can get if we encourage different people from different backgrounds to make work. When I first heard about getting this commission, I was really thinking about where do I want to work, because I do have relationships with people, some people here, not every single community or place, but I also wanted to kind of like compare, because I think sometimes when you focus on one place it can be seen as a really specific geographic issue, whereas the things that I'm talking about for like rural youth having to migrate and the lack of housing, the lack of affordability, how the cost of living crisis affects the countryside is happening all over the countryside. Yes, in different ways, in different locations, but it's affecting everyone. So I really wanted to kind of show that by having these quite different places. So when I did my foundation degree, I'd started working in Orkney, and that happened again with Fiona Matheson, who is the fisheries officer, but also a writer and an artist. So I already had people to talk to about this issue and to see, is it an issue in Orkney? And I think seeing how it's changed in 10 years is really interesting, and how all these places have changed and they're kind of having to. That was like a motivator, but also being able to talk to people who are really entangled with island life and talking about those problems and talking them through with people. So having those connections enabled me to do that, and it also enabled me to say, I really want to make this work. Who do you think it'd be good to speak to? And I met Aisling at first to kind of talk about climate and Hoy. So we met quite organically. I didn't know that I was going to photograph Aisling, but when I met her, she was so eloquent in how she talked about island life and the issues that she's facing, that I just kind of felt like this person's really important for the story, and had conversations with her about that, and ended up having her as part of the project. And again, like here, the people that I've met is kind of like that slow flow, and different people that I've worked with. So I think having these two places that are different but that I am connected to was really important to me. And I think one of the things that really came off the parallel was the lack of hope for the future and the worry about climate, specifically for working class young women, because it's not only about not being able to afford a house here, it's not being able to afford a house that is safe, and also thinking like, do I want to live somewhere that is, facing coastal erosion, is facing kind of landslides, and is facing flooding. And I think it's seeing that every single day, and as a young person, how does that affect your life? And I think both of the people who I've worked with on the voice clip have kind of talked about that they can't think about it because it makes them not have hope for this place, and that it's almost too overwhelming a feeling for them to process, and have spoke about in really, really like brilliant ways their experience of like what they hope for the future. And I think when we talk about housing crisis, it is happening in cities as well, and it is happening in different places. I think in the countryside it's really difficult because it is seen as a bit of a theme park and a bit of a place for people to have an adventure, to have a second home. People should be able to come to these places as well, but the people who grew up here need to be able to live here and access safe and affordable housing that isn't going to flood, or that isn't going to be dangerous for them to stay in, or just be able to have a decent quality of life. For me, these women, these people have voices, and my work is to kind of, how do I figure out how to tell the story? But by working with them, having these stories in places and creating these worlds that tell things, that make people ask questions and think about things a little bit differently, is the ultimate, for me, that's what I really enjoy being able to do. And that is kind of the purpose of a lot of my work, is thinking about the narratives that we think about slightly differently, and that they are multi-layered and complex, and things like class or the countryside, there's so much more to them, and these women can help me tell that story.